Audrey, I do not have the ability to turn. Oh, you got the recording going. Great. My name is Mark Michelson, and we've put together this weekly show to bring the CX community together and learn something, connect with each other, get some inspiration. So, what I would tell you to do is probably put on your view in speaker mode. It's at the very top right hand side. That way, you'll see Diane and I chat. And today, I am delighted to bring in Diane Magers. We've been good buddies here for about, I don't know, 7, 8 years, it seems, or more. And Diane has been one of the experts leading people, really wrote the whole thing about how to deal with ROI and the business side of CX. So welcome, Diane, and
Thanks.
let's chat about it.
All right. Let's go to town.
Where do we start with ROI?
Well, I guess there's really two things I'd like to talk about. I want the team to really, everybody in attendance here, to really think about how purposeful you are with starting to think about creating value in ROI. So I'm going to ask you to think about that because I'm going to share a slide here in a little bit that will kind of walk you through at least an approach that I've developed that I think really helps people to kind of embed it as you go along, because sometimes it tends to be an afterthought. Oh yeah, that's right. I got to tell the business case, or I'm going to use, NPS or whatever it is. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But I think the best way to divide this up is to really think about there's two ways that we talk about ROI, or return on investment or value. One is a lot of us talk about this correlation with net promoter score or CSAT, right? If you have higher net promoter scores, you're likely to have higher revenue, and that can be proven out with a pretty complex event. CSAT, same way. We know people who give us higher satisfaction scores stay longer, refer us more, all of that.
Mhm.
It's that quantification that we're missing. And I often talk to people and say, well, it's great you've got this number of referrals, and you see these stats all the time. What's that referral worth to your organization in dollars, right? So we're not telling the full story. And we're not telling the other half of the story. So the rest of you who are old like me, Paul Harvey, it's the rest of the story. We're not also talking about when we make changes to the organization and to the experience, we're not talking about the impact that those projects are actually having. So if I'm able to improve RFPs, for example, and do an increased win-loss ratio, increase the productivity of the team as they complete RFPs, I need to take credit for the value I've created by giving back productivity in dollars, by saying win-loss ratio is more dollars, more revenue coming in. So we're not really talking about correlation and causation as part of our entire business case when we hand it off to the executives. So that's really the first thing, Mark. Are we really thinking about it the right way, and really thinking about the story we're going to have to be telling as we really begin to define what's the experience like and what we're going to do about it? So
Excellent.
that's the first
So,
piece.
I guess, a lot of folks here are charged with designing a program as well, and they have to stand up for it. So how does one start to even, at the beginning when you're designing something, how do you start thinking ROI? I need to put some measures of success in here somehow or prove my case. I mean, a lot of us talk about loyalty things or, return, lifetime value of customer, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But how do you really, without knowing, how do you get management to buy into a program because of business and the ROI?
Well, I'm going to reverse, as a psychologist, I'm going to reverse the question to you is, what do they care about? So one of the things that I always do going into an organization is go to each of the stakeholders and find out what are they trying to accomplish? Like, what are the financial measures and metrics that they have in place today, so that I
Mhm.
understand what they're trying to achieve? Because if I go out and say, hey, we need to improve this experience, as I think about how we're improving it, I can go back and look at, hey, this person really cares about that productivity, or the sales guy wants his salespeople on the street more. So if I improve that RFP process, it gives us salespeople more time, which means more revenue. So I'm able to tie whatever we're doing to the goals of those stakeholders, and they care about that. So when you go back to them and say, we've got this project that's going to help do X, Y, and Z, and I say, you're going to get more sales time back, all of a sudden the sales guy's like, heck yeah, I'm on board. Let me have a place on the project. So you're actually building a little bit of this stakeholder piece by using that incentive and the measures and metrics that they're usually incented for, and that's what they're trying to achieve. So
You
make
know,
it about them. And
Yeah,
thinking about that at the
and that's
beginning.
important across all the different dimensions and silos, as we call them, right?
Yeah.
What's important to sales, may be important to ops, for instance. Bringing all these people together, especially now in a time of where we're disconnected but connected. How does that work? To tell a story to the salespeople about they're going to make more sales, but what about ops? How does it do that? Is it cost reduction, or what happens on that side of the business?
So it can be depending on the project or initiative you have going on, or this overall measurement of how well customers are interacting with us. We always think about when we're designing, and I'll share this slide in just a second. When we're thinking about the strategy of our value creation, is what I like to call it. We have to identify if we're going to do a project, we need to look at what value levers are we going to pull as we go through that project. So where's operations going to benefit? Well, they're going to benefit in the fact we're getting less returns, for example. If we're able to come back to them and say, this is what we identified as the opportunity and where we think that we're going to create some value for you and for the customer, then we invite them to be a part of the project. So all along the way, they're helping us to modify what we're doing to gain the most value for internally, of course, but also it helps us teach the value creation for customers. Because if we're creating value for the customer, guess what? They're going to come back more, revisit us more, advocate for us more. So it also helps connect them from a project to the outcome of what we're trying to get customers to do differently, right? We want them to advocate more. So this project, while it might have an impact for you, is actually part of a bigger scenario of making sure the customer's getting the value that they want. And we all know that as consumers, anybody who can save me time gets my money. That's just the way we are. We're looking for organizations to deliver on that.
Businesses seem to live and die on save time, make money, right? Save money, make money, whereas the customer experience world is really about doing helping the customer get what they need. First of all, right?
Mhm.
Help them get what they need, make it as easy as possible, but also a little something extra. And often companies don't want to do something extra if it's going to be a cost, or if there's going to be no tangible, I don't see the outcome immediately benefit. So on those longer term things, which are usually measured with some sort of scoring mechanism or maybe some sort of dollar value, how do you go from focus on survey scores to areas where the ROI can actually be proved, but maybe the ROI is still soft? Maybe it's still a feeling instead of a dollar.
I think that there's a lot more. I mean, you all can probably speak to this better than I can, but I think there is definitely a shift in at least the executives that we've been talking to about understanding that, but it's giving them the story to tell around that. So one of the great things about planting stories in the executive's head is about saying, hey, we're going to do this pilot on this extra thing we're going to do for a particular, let's say, B2B customer. And we know that it's probably going to cost us a little bit more, but we believe that it will help drive referrals to other B2Bs, or it's a B2B to C, and we know the consumer business, we're after that as well. And so there's 5 or 6 different ways that you can actually create these smaller stories, but not having to go full on, right? So
Mhm.
taking simple like A/B testing. Let's take a little smaller group of customers and do a pilot. And over a period of 6 months, let's see if the behavior of those particular customer set has changed around this particular thing we changed. And then we share that story to say, when we did this and everything else was equal, we found that those customers gave us more referrals. They revisited us more frequently, and we reduced our cost to serve. So we kind of put those things in place so that we can say, show them the long term, because we know executive patience, I'll call it, is not the best. They want something, put a penny to the bottom line right now. And we know that a lot of this takes time, especially if you're trying to move like a net promoter score. That's the benefit of at the beginning when I said, tie the business value to the project you're doing, because the net promoter isn't going to move tomorrow, and probably
Yeah,
not for 6 months, right? So
and that
yeah,
promoter doesn't even work really well in B2B anyhow. I mean,
no,
it's
it
just
doesn't.
you have
It doesn't.
other measures of trying to figure that out. So when you have that long term focus, right? It requires some patience and some faith and some
It does.
trust in
It
who's,
does.
and a lot of times these, the C-suite, they're even arguing with themselves over where to spend the next dollar or how to support it with resources and time. You know, getting attention for that. It's kind of like riding between a bull and a bronco or something. I'm not sure.
Well,
I
I think you hit on something that we're not doing ourselves any favors by going to the executives. So think about the executives. I know when I was running departments or in a leadership role, and my team would come to me and say, I need money for X, Y, and Z, and I had 20 people coming to me asking for money. Well, I didn't have a way to really look at all those things equally and really manage, where was I making trade-offs and investing. And so that's one, is you've got to get a seat at that table and have the same conversation. But I would also say that conversation is, you're competing against people who are talking about, like the sales team is coming in and saying, I'm going to hire 3 or high performers. I'm going to restructure the sales team so they're more productive, and I'm going to give you X in dollars. Well, we need to be talking that same language. When we go in and talking about CSAT, Net Promoter Score, some of the fuzzier things, the executives are like, well, that's nice, but when I'm making an investment and a return on investment, I want to see some numbers. And I don't care if they're, hey, this is a projection or this is off of a pilot. They want to hear, and they want to be able to compare that against the other things they're hearing. And so we're not telling the story the right way, or not telling the rest of the story, I guess I would say, going back to my first part.
No, there's been a big move over the past few years towards a more of a management style, if you will, XM, right? Combining operational data with the softer side of experiential data, which is fairly common. So, how do you get a place on the dashboard, at least, or at least some sort of way to say, are you putting out, what would you recommend to get attention at the C-suite?
Those things are already on the dashboard. So I bet if I ask any of you to ask the executives what they're really concerned about, it's customer churn right now. Right?
Mhm.
Customer churn is totally under our purview. If we understand the drivers of dissatisfaction, if we understand what we need to do to reduce those incidents that are happening that are defection indicators,
Mhm.
like one big telecom company I worked for, I won't say which one it is. We knew that if somebody got a particular home security system, that if they called the care center twice in the first month, if we had an additional truck roll and they had another visit back to the retail store, they were likely to defect 60% of the time. So we've got to take on the onus to say, if that's defection indicator is an indicator of customer experience, we need to understand and be talking that same language and how we're going to impact it. Now, when I say we, it's a cross-functional team, obviously, but we need to help the organization understand what's driving that number. So we might be looking for the different thing, like putting that promoter score on the dashboard. What does that tell us exactly? I mean, everybody, unless you're really low, you can't really impact it, and they're not correlating it to revenue and cost. So we need to shift our thinking into what on that dashboard can I impact, and then tell a story around it.
So
Yeah,
Diane,
Oh.
may I jump
yeah,
in and ask
sure.
Diane a
Jump
question?
in.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you mind? So
Yeah.
I was just in a scenario where I was building the business case for change to reduce churn, as the company was slotted to lose 280 million in 2021 on churn, and over 100,000 partners and their clients in a B2B environment. So we knew what the drivers were, but they don't want to change it because they truly aren't customer centric. And they would rather increase pricing 3 times a year to support their shareholders, and leave the drain open for their partners and clients to go down the drain. And so, in that scenario, I found that was really challenging.
Do they know how much it costs to acquire a new customer?
Oh yeah, all the numbers were there, and I had that all in my case, and it was going to be taken to the executives, and I was working with Ernst & Young on their segmentation models, and they're not ready for that change. They don't, understand. And it was wild. I never thought I'd see something. It's not surprising that half the learning and development and CX team were laid off, but I was kind of like, okay, they really don't care about their customers. and they don't want to listen to the feedback despite the $280 million slotted for churn. So back to your point that those numbers are already on the dashboard. Yes, they are.
But are they not equating it to the fact that the customer behavior is what's driving that bottom dollar? Like, it's one of those things you shake your head at. Like, do you not understand that because of what we're doing, customers are leaving, and if we change what we're doing, we're going to get different behavior. It's kind of like
well, exactly. I mean, it was a no-brainer. So it was very interesting to see, and I was building out the governance for change management, as well as taking pilot support models to show what different looked like, and that we could create a better experience, and adjust that. But they, for whatever reason, they said that, increasing their customers' pricing 3 times a year is like a drug that they won't give up.
That's a bad corporate habit. That's what that is.
Yes. So it was a very great learning experience, and definitely not a truly customer-centric organization. The experience program was much more like window dressing.
Yeah. Just to say that we're doing it. Because I bet you one of the things that we find a lot of times, especially in the B2B space, is as you increase prices and you don't have a good value proposition behind it, that customers defect. So it's actually a defection driver to increase.
Well, and I love the conversation earlier about, to me, you have to match metrics to brand promises, right? So that everything flows through the journey correctly, with the language and bringing that to life. And, when you've got complicated B2B environment and you have average handle time, right? It's not, it's mismatched of metrics. So
yeah,
great conversation. So yeah, I just wanted to share you what not to do as this company was doing that.
It's a great example of, getting their attention. And I'm just going to share this because you brought it up, but this is what I wanted to share with you. One of the things that we don't do, and I talked up at the beginning about planning, your ability to talk about the value of experience. So thinking about that value strategy, what Lisa's referring to is the fact that the strategy of how we're going to use what we know about customers, how we're going to change their experience and how they behave with the organization is part of what we're trying to accomplish. So even before you get started, having a discussion around getting the right voice of customer and picking the right metrics, if that value strategy isn't at the top of your list, then the executives aren't going to see that even as you get started. So set yourself up for success. And then even as we go through, and you can see this whole wheel here, it's how we really start to create that value in engaging everybody in the organization through all of our activities. So the second one is journey discovery. So when you do mapping exercises, whether it's future or current state, one of the things I encourage you to do is have a swim lane that's for the financial impact of the current or future experience on the financials of the organization. Because if you drill down into, because we're having this issue, what are the things that are impacting our financial value? Could be, customers are not referring us, or productivity, as we talked about. So when you're doing that, make sure that you're capturing that financial impact when you do your mapping. And then when you're doing future state design, one of the things that you'll find with designers is they don't really they don't think about the value you're creating. They do think about the experience, which is important, but they're not thinking about when they have this experience, are we driving people to a lower cost channel? Are we enabling them with content that's going to allow them to stay on the page longer, which means we're going to have more engagement from them, which typically turns into more product purchase and revenue? Are you really designing that value as you're designing future experiences and making sure that's part of it? And then the value creation is actually when you're in the middle of doing that, are you looking holistically at all the things that are happening to make sure that value gets created, that target that you've set out? And then the next thing that I'll talk about is, I don't know how many times I've worked with leaders in customer experience who say, I've got all this information and, we set out this great business case and I just don't know how to, we're still not getting funding for our efforts. And I said, well, did you tell anybody about the value that you realized because of it? And they said, no, we kind of launched the project and then we were on to the next thing. And I said, you're missing the rest of the story again. You're not saying and like anybody else in the organization, we set out to do this. Here's our trajectory of what we think we're going to get. Here's what we've achieved in the first 3 or 4 months. Either we're on or off target. And then over time, even a year from then, go back and tell that story. We started to realize this value. Now we've seen this change. You need to start accumulating that and making sure you continually tell a story based on even projects you've already launched. Don't just move on to the next thing and not really care for that and make sure you're starting to talk about the exponential value you got out of it. Or, a year ago we got this and now we have this number of customers who are staying with us. Because that really helps you in that value optimization. And what that means is now we're looking at many things that we're doing and saying, how can we really take all the things that we're doing and start to put it across the board, this kind of optimization, kind of like journey optimization, if you hear about that today, or orchestration. Yeah.
Diane, it's me again. Shocker. I love this. And I think that, speaks to the values that support the brand promises that need to be communicated and be a part of the culture. And, sometimes those things are just words and they haven't built the language and how that experience should feel and sound so that we can actually coach teams on what it should be like.
Yeah, and what behavior are you after? I mean, I hate to sound like a psychologist, but I am. So what are you trying to get people to do and think differently about your brand? Like, if I want more customers coming in the front door, what do I need to do to bring people to the table? Because that's going to drive if I get more people in the store, it's going to drive more revenue. Michelle Bregman, you can probably talk about this with 7-Eleven. Yes, Tanner. But yeah, I think this being more systematic about what you're doing when it comes to creating value is important, because we kind of think of it as an afterthought. And I don't know what it is about, maybe it's because we're all people, but we just don't make the connection to the value the way we should, like everybody else in the organization is. You're competing
Diane,
against the sales team.
we have just a few more minutes here, and there was
Sure.
a great question that came in here from Susan Walker. And Susan, I don't know if you want to come on screen. If you do, just turn your video on and your mic and feel free to ask. If not, I'll kick it off for you. And it's about the definition of roles, right? There you are. There's Susan. You want to put your question to us?
Sure. I guess, I kind of live with one foot in each side of the fence. I'm inside sales and I'm customer service and customer experience. And one of the discussions of the last couple of years has really been the introduction of this role called customer success. And it's an intriguing one because no one has the same definition of it, no matter who you talk to, whether it's B2B or B2C. It's a combination role in most cases. I find it somewhat frustrating as a leader in the customer side of the house, because oftentimes it's really about trying to pull more from the existing customer, whether they need it or not, because sales has basically failed to meet their number. And the statistic out there is, 67 to 70% of Salesforce employees don't meet their goals annually. Well, that organization still has to meet a number. And so where are they going for that? Well, they're going to the existing customer base, right? So that kind of is contrarian to, well, you're bleeding one side of the house in order to satisfy the money number, but you're not giving that customer experience perhaps what they want or what they need, right? There's only so much you can get from customers. So my question is really, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you hearing about this role? Because is it a salesperson who hasn't succeeded but has the knowledge of sales to then interact with the customer? Or is it a customer service person who gets taught enough to be dangerous to be a salesperson? It's a hard call. And where do you put it in the organization? It's not going away. Like a few years back, sales development reps and business development reps became important because, that's taking a burden away from a salesperson who really doesn't know how to go out and prospect. He can close, but he can't prospect. Then you have sales operations. That became important for good reason. Then you had sales enablement. Okay, we got to get everybody marching to the same drum at the same pace and learning from, one hymn book. now you've got this customer success role. Where does this fit? Where's it going to go? What should it be?
That's a loaded question, but I can at least give you the perspective of how it started. So if I'm going to channel Nick Mehta, who is the CEO for Gainsight, so they're a huge customer success. They kind of started the whole wave. Originally, it came out of how when the subscription model came into play, that these customer success teams were put in place because they'd sell technology with a subscription model. And if the customer didn't get value out of it, by the time they got to renewal, right, they didn't renew. And so this was originally set up to say, help the customer make sure they're getting value from what they purchased, that we're making sure they know the features that they have and that we're solving any issues with adoption and that we're really helping them to do that. So if you go back to the pureness of what that was, by creating more value and helping the organization realize they're getting value, it's not a sell, it's just you bought something, you're getting value, and it naturally leads to higher renewal rates, right? Or more seats or better adoption. So it's not about the sale piece, it's more about telling that value story, just like we were talking about here, for that organization. That's originally what it started, and it has been a bit twisted in saying this is just a takeover, glorified account management role, where a sales team is on to the next thing, they're on to the next prospect, and nobody's taking care of showing people the love once they come on board after onboarding. Who's supposed to do that? So I think it's the definition, to your point, Susan, of what is that role supposed to do and where are they focused? Are they focused on more sales, or are they focused on creating value and realizing value for what they purchased?
And the reality, unfortunately, will be that it's an overlay, right? They're gonna be half in sales and they're gonna be half in customer service. There's just no way around it. And so it's a very unique role in a B2B environment, and it's a very unique person that can kind of straddle that line. Because if you go too heavy on the sales side with an existing customer, you're alienating. If you go too heavy on the service side, well, you're falling into a trap there too. So it's a very interesting.
That's an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, you're thinking about it way differently than a lot of people do. They just kind of let it roll, assuming that everybody's doing the same thing. It's that consistency in that customer success role that I think makes the difference, because you get people who are way overboard on the sales, and you get people who are just making sure they call the customer so often and they're not really doing the value equation we just talked about.
Well, folks,
and the customer gets confused.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Depends on who I talk to.
Folks, we're at the end of our part of this program, because we don't want to have really long recordings later. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a breakout session in just a moment. Before I do that, Diane, I do want you to share the link. I know you're going to be doing a workshop on ROI, and that workshop is when?
It starts April 15th, and Greg Tucker, if you all know Greg Tucker, he's the master. He's the one who wrote the book on this, because he was a CMO for an organization, and so he can tell the story. But it starts April 15th. It's 6 weeks, but it's an hour and a half every week, and there'll be homework and discussions, and really that supporting of how are you going to go build your business case. And it centers around this value creation wheel that I shared with you. So we'll talk in depth about what's that look like and how do we do it. So I sent you the link, but I'll pull it back up.
Yeah, put it in the chat here, but I'll also send that out to everyone in the follow-up email. So that if anyone here is interested in joining that workshop, you'll have it in the email that follows up with the replay as well. So a big thank you to Diane for helping us understand a little bit more about how to get the attention and the value proposition down. Get the attention of C-suite, get the attention of customers, get the value down. We are going to close this out for this episode. I want to let you know next week we're going to have a focus on real estate, which is probably the hottest market going on in the age of COVID these days. So I've got a good friend, Jill Heineck, who also hosts a program called the Customer Experience Radio. So what we're going to do, we're going to go into breakout sessions. We're going to have 2 of them. They're 15 minutes long each, about 4 people in each room. Share your ROI discussions there. We do this every week. So thank you all for coming. And Audrey, let's take it out and start the networking time.